Jared.
Is it pending?
Okay, so we'll start with some quick introductions. Again, my name is David Fagerstrom. I'm the Senior Project Manager for Sunt Construction. With me is Michael Nair, one of our project managers, and also Jared Wagoner, who is also one of our project managers working on the project with us. This project, the owner is the Willamette Water Supply Program, and the owner's project manager is Matthew Gribbins. And our engineer of record, this project was designed by CDM Smith. The project manager is Michael Highland. And you can see all of our pertinent contact information there. I want to ask that all the participants in the meeting today add their contact information to the chat, or send myself, Michael, or Jared an email to our email addresses listed.
Yeah, so if you have not received an official bid invite through SmartBid and you're requesting a bid of invite, please let us know, so that way we can get you access to SmartBid and access the documents.
All right, so just a quick overview of who Sunt Construction is. Sunt Construction is a national general contractor headquartered out of Tempe, Arizona. We were founded in 1890. We are a 100% employee-owned company. We've got regional offices.
Well, he's probably sick along Painey.
Stretch.
He's back at Long.
From Texas through the south.
Yeah.
Have we lost audio?
Yes.
I can't do anything.
Yeah, I can hear you, but I'm not hearing who was talking before.
Yeah, give us just a second. Someone muted our line.
All right, sorry about that, folks. Okay, so continuing on. Don't know where we lost our audio, but again, Sunt is a national general contractor headquartered out of Tempe, Arizona. We were founded in 1890, 100% employee-owned company. We've done work pretty much all across the country. Our main focus is the states you see highlighted in red, where we have various regional offices stretching from Texas through the Southwest, California, and up into the Northwest. Sunt has multiple divisions. We have a building group that focuses on your vertical type construction projects. We have a transportation group that does roads, bridges, highways, things of that nature. We have a concrete division that handles all the concrete work for the various other divisions within the company. And then you've got the industrial group, which is the group that is representing this project and that Mike, Jared, and I work for, and will be handling this project. All right, so our agenda for today, we've got quite a few topics to cover. Rather than reading off the list of agenda, essentially we're going to start with a project overview of the whole program, the various projects that the program's doing, highlight some of the details, and then get into the project schedule, the bid schedule, and some of the particulars related to the bidding process, with the various instructions to bidders, pre-qual forms, and various exhibits and attachments. And then we'll open it up at the end for some questions. All right, so safety is a very important component to SUNT. You know, it's very important that all of our personnel go home at the end of the day the same way they showed up to the office or the job site. So with that, we like to start every meeting that we have with a safety share. And for today's pre-bid meeting, Jared's put together a quick safety share that he'll go through.
Yeah, sure. So a good safety plan on a job is going to have layers of protection to ensure that nothing is going to slip through and everyone goes home safe at the end of each workday, like Dave was saying. This table here shows how we're going to layer the formal communication on the job site to achieve that end. So starting at the top, the task hazard analysis, THA, is due each day from each crew working and is supposed to address the hazards and tasks for that day and any changing conditions or adjacent work that the crew is going to experience. The JHA, or work plan, is a document that's due for each definable feature of work, so like a concrete structure, wall assembly, or pipeline, and that's going to address all of the steps, the risks, and how the crew is going to mitigate or reduce those risks for the larger chunk of work or larger definable feature of work. Each morning, we're going to start off with a 15-minute management stand down. So that's the leadership of the project. We're going to get together and make sure that everyone on the team is on the same page before we get started for the day and before we go out to talk with the crews. So that's the PM, superintendent, engineers, managers. We'll get together and have that conversation. Every day, each crew is expected to have a toolbox meeting to review and sign the THA, do a stretch and flex, and review the plan for the day. Once a week, the SUNT team is going to pull everyone together that's currently on the job site and do an all-hands meeting. We'll do that once a week. Everyone will need to attend that meeting. That one's going to be run by SUNT's construction manager, project manager, and our health and safety professional, talking about those major trends that we're seeing on the job site and the major flow of work that's going to be happening for the next week. On top of that, the supervisors, so the superintendents for each one of the subcontractors and crews, are going to get together on a weekly basis and do a little bit deeper dive into the plan for the next week and those trends and how we can work safely together. Each month, the project leadership is going to get together to do a health check on all of our safety systems to make sure that the THAs, the JHAs, the work plans, those stand-down meetings, and the weekly meetings, those are all occurring correctly and everyone's getting what they need out of it, and that everything is being covered correctly, and that if we need to make any modifications as a leadership group, we can address them there. Every month, the Willamette Water Supply Program is going to host a safety meeting at their project management office. So this is not just the water treatment plant, but also any of the other active projects that the Willamette Water Supply System has ongoing at the time being. So addressing the safety from the program perspective as a whole. And then finally, on an annual or as-needed basis, we're going to invite the emergency response providers to come to the job site to take a look at the job site, and in the event of an emergency, how they would respond, what their access routes are, and what the conditions of the job site are going to look like. So ideally, this is going to create an environment where everyone gets to have a voice in safety, and we can send people home safe at the end of every day.
Perfect. Yeah, so you can see that safety is integral to everything that we do in our planning. We monitor it, we measure it, and we always seek to improve it. So keep that in mind as you're gearing up for this project. Thanks, Jared. All right, so starting with a quick project overview, looking at the highlights of the whole program. The water treatment plant is made up of a bigger program that is put together. It's the Willamette Water Supply Commission, which is made up of the Tualatin Valley Water District, the City of Hillsborough, and the City of Beaverton. Approximate total program value is in the neighborhood of $1.3 billion. Click one more, I think. The treatment plant is the project that SUNT has. The arrow is pointing to it on the map there. I know it's kind of hard to see, but this is a general vicinity map of the whole region. That's the water treatment plant. The program also consists of the raw water facility, which pulls the water off the Willamette River. Then you've got various transmission mains of pipeline all through the cities, north of 30 miles of pipeline. And then you've got another project, which is the reservoir site, which is north of where we're at. And then lastly, again, is the water treatment plant that SUNT is working on. SUNT was selected to be the construction manager, general contractor for this project. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with the CMGC process, but basically SUNT was brought on with the project team early in the design to help with constructability, cost estimating, and other various deliverables throughout the pre-construction phase. Zooming in a little bit closer, wanted to highlight kind of the project location. The site is basically located on the southwest corner of Tualatin-Sherwood Road and 124th Street in Sherwood. It's set back south of Tualatin-Sherwood. There's a commercial development right on that intersection. We are just south of that, shown in the red box on the image. Directly across the street is a PGE power substation and Tigard Sand and Gravel. The site was strategically chosen. The project is being designed to meet specific seismic requirements to be able to provide, a reliable water source to the customers of the treatment plant and this whole system. A couple things to note specifically about the project site is it is a greenfield site. It's currently heavily forested, lots of large trees. The subsurface conditions, though, is there is a lot of rock, which means that virtually all of the excavations, whether it be structural excavations for pipelines, duct banks, most all of that excavation is going to need to be done through blasting. We're working with quite a few AHJs or permitting agencies. We've listed some of them here. This is not a complete list, but you can see we've got Oregon DEQ, Washington County, City of Sherwood, Tualatin Valley Fire Department. So several AHJs that we're working with. Right, so zooming in a little bit further again, what we're showing here is a site plan of the new facility, and I'm just going to hit on some of the project highlights here. Project site is about 23 acres. Again, water treatment plant, so there are multiple treatment areas, which we'll kind of highlight a little bit more in the next couple of slides. Aside from the water treatment plant, process buildings, we've also got an administration building, kind of a Class A 10,000 square foot office facility. With any water treatment plant, you've got a lot of structural concrete. We're approximating about 40,000 yards of concrete. I mentioned the excavation and the earthwork with the drilling and blasting on the previous slide, but we've got several thousand yards, about 65,000 yards of cut and fills, 180,000 yards of structural excavation, and over 100,000 yards of pipe excavation. The process equipment is a significant portion of the project, somewhere in the neighborhood of $24 million for all the various treatment processes, the process equipment. The water will be stored on site in a 10 million gallon pre-stressed concrete reservoir. Aside from the administration building, there's various other metal buildings on site. And what this means is there are several building trade opportunities for the local contractors to participate in this project. All right, so as I mentioned, the last slide is going to kind of walk through real quickly just a general overview of the various treatment processes or facilities on site. This image that you see right here on this slide is what we're calling the main process building. This is where the majority of the treatment process happens. The water comes through underground pipeline and enters in this building towards the left-hand top side of the facility into the ballasted flock. From there, the flow of the water goes north into the ozone contactors, ozone generators, and then finally into the filters before it crosses back to the right side or the east side of the facility into the UV disinfection building. This facility also has your chemical facility, your main chemical facility, primarily all indoor, and then your outdoor chemical facilities. And then you can see on the left-hand side of the image, the administration building is also connected to the process building. All right, advancing through the project, the facilities that you're seeing here in these images are north of the process building. On the left-hand image, in the front of the image at the bottom, you can see that's the EQ overflow. That's where any overflow water gets sent in the facility for future processing. This is a deep concrete water-bearing structure. Behind that in the top left is the clear well. That's the 10 million gallon pre-stressed reservoir that I mentioned. To the right of that is your finished water pump station. That's where the water ultimately ends up going and gets pumped out through the distribution system. Just below the finished water pump station is the surge mitigation. That's those round cylinder tank looking items, and then your equipment storage building. The image on the right is the same facilities, just looking at it from the opposite perspective. Then the last area that we have is the solids handling facility. These structures are going to be west or to the left of where the process building was. And this is where all these solids are handled, dewatered, treated, and hauled off site. You've got your thickeners, which are basically like some clarifiers. You've got the thickened sludge pump station, which delivers the sludge to the solids handling structure, and then finally to the solids dewatering building, where there's a couple of screw presses, some polymer equipment, where it's dewatered, conveyed into trucks, and then hauled off site. So that's kind of an overview of the entire treatment process. Again, you've got lots of trade opportunities for the various building components, the industrial type stuff, your process mechanical, and all your electrical, associated HVAC, fire protection, those things associated with those structures. Right, so now we wanted to talk about a couple of the key components with the project that we're going to ask you to pay special attention to when you're going through the documents. And the first item are the seismic design requirements. I briefly mentioned this on one of the first slides, that the seismic resiliency is a key component to this project. The facility and the owner wants this facility to be back pretty much in operation within a set period after a potential seismic event. So we've built into the design and the specifications set requirements for confirming seismic qualification. And this is going to apply to a good amount of the components on the project. Your process equipment, your process piping, a lot of your electrical equipment, your HVAC equipment. It covers pretty much the whole gamut. And I'm just going to ask that you spend some time reviewing the specifications and the requirements for it. We've highlighted it here. It's Division 01-8829 Seismic Performance Requirements. And it's going to walk you through what needs to be seismically qualified and how to do it. And there's multiple ways to receive the seismic certification. The first one is through analysis. And that is basically by performing engineered calculations with set criteria to confirm, from a desk analysis that the equipment could withstand the specified seismic event. The second method is through testing, and that's physical testing. That's taking the actual equipment and placing it basically on a shake table and testing it that it will withstand that seismic event. And then the last way is through experience. And again, the specifications detail this out, but basically if you have similar equipment that has gone through an actual seismic event, an actual earthquake that is directly relatable, and you can potentially qualify that equipment through that experience. Then there's some caveats to this where there are combinations of how you can meet those qualifications through combination of analysis and experience or analysis and testing. So again, I just ask that you spend some time looking at this spec. We call it out in the scope of work. You'll even see it on some of the bid forms that we're asking you to confirm values for complying with seismic qualifications. So the next topic that we wanted to highlight that's a key component to this project are the delegated design requirements. And most of you should be familiar with this. Delegated design submittals are essentially submittals or final design documents that are prepared by the subcontractor. Your typical ones are your things like fire alarm, fire sprinkler, pre-engineered metal buildings. We just wanted to highlight that because it's a key component to this project. It's important to note that your delegated design needs to be stamped and sealed by a professional engineer licensed in the state of Oregon. Again, there's several requirements for delegated design. We've called out the specifications 01-1100, summary of work for a full list of delegated design items. Just ask that you pay special attention to that as well and go through those requirements. Again, we have called this out in your scope of work, so it's important that you review those requirements.
All right, next we'll go into the project schedule. So this is a very high-level schedule that in the bid documents we have provided a fully detailed P6 schedule for you all, but we want to provide kind of a very high-level 10,000-foot view of the project and basically how each trade, the windows of time that each trade is expected to be on site. So that's kind of what's being shown here on the screen. We are expecting to receive limited notice to proceed in February of 2022, and that we'll start issuing contracts based on that, and we're expecting to be able to put shovel in the ground in late April, early May, with a completion date for the water treatment plant as of June of 2025. So we have roughly 3 years, and 2 months to complete the project. And we'll go, next slide we'll go over is a couple of milestones here. So as I mentioned, we're expecting limited notice to proceed beginning of February of 2022. We're expecting to receive physical notice to proceed early April. There's a GMP2, which is late scope of work for more of landscaping, curb and gutter, that type of finishes work. That work we're expecting to occur to get NTP in October of 2023. We have a water treatment plant startup and commissioning milestone, which is June of 2025. And then we have a construction substantial completion milestone of the end of 2025, December 31st of 2025. And then we have to have all of our closeout documents completed by no later than March of 2026. One thing we do want to point out here is warranties will commence upon successful water treatment startup and commissioning complete, which is June 25th. Expected to be June 25th of 2025. So if you have warranties associated with your scope of work, which most do, we're expecting that the clock will be ticking on warranty starting on June 25th, 2025. Moving on to the bid schedule. So today, we're all here to talk about GMP1, which is about 95% of the entire scope of work on this project. We advertised officially on the 27th of September. We're here today for the pre-bid kickoff meeting. We have an RFI deadline of October 21st, which is 2 weeks and a day from today. We ask that you give us any questions that you may have. Please send them to either Jared, David, or I, to the orwater@sunt.com, or to any of the other SUNT estimators that you may be working with. And we'll make sure we get those over to CDM Smith or the client. We'll have an addenda deadline of October 29th of 2021. So we expect that no addenda will be issued after October 29th. And bids due ultimately November 4th. As I mentioned earlier, there's a GMP2 scope, which is for the last 5% of the work, and we're expecting to advertise for that scope of work in April of 2023. Currently, we do not anticipate any extension of the bid due date for GMP1. All right, moving on to GMP1 bid opportunities. So why you all are here today. We have an extensive amount of what we call work category packages or scope of works that are part of this bid effort. We have a cumulative total of 73 different packages that we are working on, bidding out. And we just want to kind of show here on the screen of what those work category packages are. So I'll just take a little bit of time to review this. So in the first column here is the work category number and description. So each one of these line items we're expecting is a package that will be bid out. Each one of these will have its own separate bid form that each respective bidder will provide a number to. And kind of going over to the next few columns. Under GMP, this is obviously GMP1, so what's being reflected here. Under procurement type, this is ultimately what we expect will be the contract that we will establish with you all, so be it a subcontract or purchase order. So as we go through these slides, and this has also been provided to all the bidders, that you can be able to review this and review the respective subcontract or purchase order accordingly. And then on the last three columns there is the selection method. This is important. This is reiterated in most of the bid documents, but wanted to go through here. A majority of all of the work category packages will be bid out as a low bid. And what that means is ultimately when we get your price from you all, we'll abstract it, which means we'll do a side-by-side comparison to your peers to make sure that the scope of work in its entirety is captured. And then at the end of the day, whoever is the lowest price is the one that will be selected. We do have a few negotiated scopes of work, but those are already been negotiated with the client or with the respective firms. And then we also have a few best value scopes of work, and we'll go through a little bit more definition of what best value is, but there is a qualifications package that's required to be submitted along with pricing. So we'll go to the next page here. This is, again, just kind of a continuation of the spreadsheet that we just reviewed here, going through division 21 through some of the process equipment of 46, and then on to the next page. That was it. So
Yeah, I was going to mention, I know it's kind of hard to read that spreadsheet on this PowerPoint, but all of those work categories are listed out in our instructions to bidders, so you can see what packages or scope trades that there are part of this GMP1 bidding effort.
Yep. All right, so want to go through
Hey,
Smart Bid.
This is Josh with Cupertino. I do have a question on the best value for the electric bid.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, the value of the abstract is 650 points, right? Is there a way,
Yeah.
how are you defining how that gets broken up?
So in the qualifications document, the breakdown of those 650 points is shown on each of the subsections of the clause.
No, so maybe I missed it. I saw where, there's 150 points for X, but there was a major bulk of points, which was 650, and that's going to be on the lowest bid abstract. My question is that lowest abstract is going to, has multiple items. So how's that going to be weighed?
It's based on the total price. That 650 is the pricing component.
Okay.
Your price is
So
just.
it's not give and take. It's just one price and that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When you said the 650, I was thinking of the clause, but the 650 is the pricing component.
It's more the pricing component. So it's not going to be weighed per line item. It's just going to be one. You're the low bid, so that's worth 650 points.
Yes. Yep. Good question. All right, we'll move on to Smart Bid. For those of you that are already on Smart Bid, some of this may already be repetitive, but I think there are a few people that are on the call today that have not not have access to Smart Bid, so we just want to kind of go through that effort. So what is Smart Bid? Smart Bid is our electronic plan room. It's what we utilize to issue all of our bid documents, bid addenda, bid submissions, as well as basically keeping task of who is bidding what individual work categories. Smart Bid access can be obtained by contacting Sunt Industrial Group at orwater@sunt.com or by calling 480-293-3000. Or as we said earlier, you can send an email to David, Jared, or I, and we can make sure that we get you access to the work categories that you would like to bid. We just want to put a note out there that we do require a non-disclosure agreement to be signed by anyone that wants to look at the bid documents before you get access. So if you have an issue with the NDA and you're refusing to sign it, we cannot give you access to those documents.
Yeah, I'll say that whenever you log into Smart Bid, the NDA will come up as part of the process for getting into Smart Bid to execute.
Correct.
So it's not a separate document that we'll send you outside the system. You'll log into Smart Bid, the NDA will come up for execution, and that's your gate to get to the rest of the documents.
Correct. Good point. Yep. So when we send you the invite, it'll come as an email to you, and And those are a couple buttons on the top there. So the first is you can go click on this link at the top where it says View Project and View on Digital Bid Board. If you click on that, that's what will bring you to the link to SmartBid. And if you haven't signed in before, that's what will ask you for to review and sign the NDA. And then you'll have access to all the bid documents. Another link that's on here is there's a link at the bottom here where it says yes, I'll bid all codes. This is if you intend on bidding the codes, you can click on that and the system will automatically log you in that you are intending to bid, or you could be able to select no, I won't bid this job, and again that will let the system know and let us know that you have no intention to bid the job. Now, Sun Estimator will, if you do click no, I won't bid the job, Sun Estimator will probably still contact you just to reconfirm that you intended to click that button. But we do want to respect, you all's time so we won't continue to badge you with additional electronic information such as addendas that come out. So when you log into SmartBid, it's a fairly intuitive layout, but what you'll go to is tab 4, which is the Files and Plan Room. And in there is a file structure that has all of the documents. So when you go to open the documents, a folder tree will open up, and then you can be able to download all the documents. So you can actually select individual documents that you want to download. You can download any folders that are underneath or any documents that are underneath a given folder, or you can download all documents. If you have issues with downloading the documents, please feel free to reach out to us, and we will walk you through the system. I will say that we do have a model, a Navisworks model that is available. It was too large to be able to upload to SmartBid. So if you're interested, please email Jared or I or David, and we can make sure we get you the model. But on the Files and Plan Room, we do have the CAD drawings that have been given to us by CDM Smith. So those are there for your use.
All right. So once you get into SmartBid, the first document I'd recommend you open up is Instructions to Bidders. So it's right at the root level PDF document to take a look at. Instructions to Bidders will carry you through the first set of instructions and kind of lay out the framework for how the bidding process is expected to proceed. 5 basic paragraphs: introduction, bidding requirements, procedures, some base level project requirements and procedures, insurance, and bidding documents. So let me actually pop open this Instructions to Bidders real quick so we can scroll through it and highlight some of the important items on here. And I'll ask Mike or Dave to jump in if they see me scrolling past something that they think we need to highlight. So within the first section, section 1, the purpose for what we're doing, bidding out the project. This paragraph right here is important for some of the work packages. So Sunt has capabilities and is intending on participating as a bidder on a couple of the work packages that I'll highlight below. When those work packages are evaluated, we'll take the abstracted bid price, and for Sunt's packages, they will have a 9% fee added to them. A subcontractor's proposal will have a 3.5% fee added to it. The proposal price plus that fee is what is going to be determined for determining the apparent low price in the selected awardee. Here's that table again of the work categories and the selection methods. The items that have a red asterisk next to them are the ones that Sunt is intending on submitting a proposal for.
Yep. So we do intend to submit a proposal for structural concrete, for structural steel and miscellaneous metals, earthwork and yard piping, and process piping, process integration.
Here's that schedule again for your reference on when the bidding period is. So bid submittals are due November 4th at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you're submitting a low price selection work package, as we identified in that table above, you can submit those electronically through SmartBid, Alternatively, you can also email those to the orwater@sunt.com. If it's a best value selection work package, any of the best value selection work packages are going to be received by the Willamette Water Supply rather than Sunt, just to keep the lines straight so that there's no conflict of interest on that one.
To maintain transparency.
Yeah, to maintain some transparency. So the email we'd like to submit those best value work packages is right there. It's going to be submitted in one email, and the instructions for how you need to label your documents are located here. So it needs to come in two separate packages. We gave you in each one of the best value work packages a bid form for how you need to indicate your pricing, as well as a statement of qualifications. So the couple of questions and requirements on the statement of qualifications, and that needs to be a separate PDF labeled appropriately within the same email that goes to that Willamette Water Supply email.
Yep. So before we move on from this, just kind of reiterate, if the best value selection scopes of work are structural concrete, electrical, earthwork and yard piping, and process integration. So if you plan on bidding any of those work packages, the statement of qualifications and your bid forms need to be submitted via email to the email indicated here in the instructions to bidders. And the SOQ, the qualifications, need to be one PDF. Your bid form is a separate PDF. And the reasoning for that is so that way when the documents get turned in, the pricing will be given to one group and the qualifications will be given to another group. So that way the grading is done independently of each other. So that way the cost is not influencing ultimately what the qual grading is.
Well, thanks, Mike. All right. Scrolling past a couple of these items, they're valuable information on the project. We're going to cover some of the WIFIA requirements later on, and I'll define that here in a minute. I do want to point out that the project is using WIFIA money. However, we do not have DBE or MBE goals on the project. There is a goal for minority and female trade workforce participation of 4.5% and 6.9% respectively. Yep.
So just to reiterate on that, we do not have a subcontractor required MeBe, WeBe, DBE participation, but we do have a trade percentage that we're being asked to meet.
The bids are not going to be open publicly. I'll cover that, the laws related to that here in a second, here on a couple of slides. The bid's going to be deemed responsive if it's been received on or before the deadline. The bid form is completed in its entirety, and the submitter has been pre-qualified by Sunt Construction and is a registered SAM.gov entity with no active exclusions. So the pre-qualification for Sunt Construction is an online portal, and we'll have some more information here on that in a second. The bid documents, these are all available for you in SmartBid. What we lay out here is how each one of the documents that you have during the bidding phase, what we're going to do with that when we ultimately award these contracts. If it's going to be an attachment, it will not appear in the contract. If it's an exhibit, those will transfer directly and become a contract document. We'll cover each one of these exhibits in detail later on. The intent is to bid all the work required on the project. So the SOWs are going to lay out all of these requirements that we need to do. All the drawings, specifications, and any work which is in the bidding or contract documents which is inferable from or is a logical extension of those documents shall be considered as part of the work, expect to be included as part of your contract or purchase order. Right here, so this is repeated on each one of our bid forms. The bidding period for the project, so the bids are due November 4th. We'll need the price on those bid forms to be good for 150 days. The reason behind the 150 days is Sunt has to have time in order to prepare our abstracts, make a selection, present a guaranteed maximum price or GMP to the client. The client will need to take that and take it to committee approval before we can turn around and give notice of selection or award. So that's the reason for the 150-day period there. We're asking everyone to make sure that we are competitive on all work packages. So we're looking for the best pricing on all these. The minimum qualification shouldn't overly restrict market competition. It's expected that some of the work packages are going to meet schedule or quality requirements and will have an enhanced pre-qualification or submittal requirements. Several of the bid forms have some enhanced pre-qualification requirements built into them. And several of the packages we've previously mentioned are going to be best value packages. So there's a couple layers there of pre-qualification and submittal packages that are built into the documents. Some subcontracts are not public contracts within the meaning of the Oregon Revised Statute. However, we are going to conform to the Oregon Revised Statute as indicated here. There is an exhibit for voluntary escalation or de-escalation programs. So with that 150-day bid period and with the length of the project, there's been some concern on escalation and de-escalation. We'll cover Exhibit T whenever we go through it in a little bit more detail.
So before we leave from that, so we do recognize that, the volatility of the market, that's, and uncertainty of what's going to be happening here over the next couple of months and next couple of years. So we've worked diligently with the client to figure out the best way to minimize your risk of bidding the project and be able to get us the best pricing, the lowest pricing available today. And so we've come up with a unique strategy of being able to manage escalation and or de-escalation of given material types and commodities. And we'll go through that here in a little bit, but I just want to let you all know that there is an avenue to have escalation and de-escalation covered by the client in SUNT.
Under substitution, so specifications in a lot of places indicate required manufacturers or products. If you have specific knowledge of a product or manufacturer that's not listed in the specification, you're encouraged to provide a substitution request for that. If you come across that case where you believe that a product might be superior, either in performance or in cost, send us an email and we'll do our best to run that past the client and engineer to see if that substitution is going to be acceptable to the project. Under subcontractor pre-qualification, we'll repeat this a few times. There's an email here. Lisa Best is our pre-qualification manager at SUNT. So if you need help with the pre-qualification process, she can get you started on that pre-qualification process. There's a couple of bid alternates that are baked into the documents as well. We'll cover that in a little bit more detail. There's a total of 7 alternates that need to be considered as part of a various number of packages. These are the 7 alternates, and we'll provide some description and some further information on which packages specifically need to include those, but we expect that all bidders are going to take a look at all of the alternates to ensure that they, in fact, do not have scope covered, even if they're not indicated on that bid alternate matrix.
Yep.
Section 3 is our project requirements and procedures. This is a very general coverage of statement of work for how we expect the entire project and each one of our trade contractors to coordinate with each other as well as the general contractor. So a lot of the information in here is necessary for you to include as you're considering putting your package together. The specific job-specific statement of work and coordination requirements are included either in your SOW or in the Exhibit B.1 special project requirements. There's of course, any construction project we'll expect submittals, and we'd like you to submit your procurement schedule within 5 days after we award you a subcontract for getting all of your submittals in. There's a number of holidays that we're going to recognize on the project, so those are listed here.
Yeah, we do know that the owner in addendum number 1, we will be adding an additional holiday, which is going to be Juneteenth. So we're expecting addendum number 1 to be issued this upcoming Friday. In 2 days, and one of those items will be inclusion of Juneteenth as a federal holiday or as a recognized holiday.
There's a number of project closeout requirements on the job specifically to provide O&M, startup, training, as-built documentation. So we lay out what those project closeout requirements are here, as well as Exhibit B, and warranty requirement as well, spare parts, and how we're going to handle all of that information. So with you, the project is funded through a federal program from the EPA called the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. It's a federally funded project, so it comes with a couple requirements for the project to receive this funding. Those are laid out specifically in Exhibit L. Briefly to cover with you, so there's a few extra laws that we need to pay attention to. There's a requirement for you to be a SAM.gov registration. We need to verify that at the time of your bidding process, so make sure that you're good on SAM.gov with no active exclusions on there before you submit your bid. The project's going to have a prevailing wage requirement. So this prevailing wage needs to be the higher of either the Boley or the Davis-Bacon wages. Those wage rate determinations are included in Exhibit P for your information. And finally, the WIPIA requirements has an American iron and steel requirement. So it requires tracking of any iron or steel that's used permanently on the project to have traceability back to a U.S.-made source. So that information is included in here as well.
One thing to note on that, Jared mentioned permanent materials. If there arises a situation where something was intended to be temporary but ultimately becomes permanent, that also needs to comply with AIS. And the common thing that is covered here is any shoring. If shoring is left in place, you know,
soldier piles or soil nails. Yep.
Okay.
I have a question regarding the AIS for process equipment. Is that applicable for all the process equipment?
There is a memo that provides exclusions for process equipment. If you're not familiar with that, if you would mind submitting a question, we can provide you access to some of that data. But there are exclusions to the AIS. Some of your electrical equipment, your process equipment, those specially manufactured items are excluded from AIS requirements.
Thank you.
Good question, thank you. Warranty for the project is going to be 1 year. As we mentioned before, that's from successful startup and completion date, so this will be revised.
Yep. In addendum number 1 coming out this Friday, we will provide clarification that warranties start from the date of successful start the commissioning of the water treatment plant.
The insurance requirements on the job, those are going to be within the sample form of agreement. So we've included attachment 3 and 4, which are your subcontract and purchase order agreements. Those lay out the insurance requirements. We also have an exhibit F, which is the supplementary insurance requirements, which helps spell that out just a little bit more and clarifies that document, those documents. And then section 5 of the instruction submitters is just a list of exhibits that are included in the total set of bid documents. If you looked in that attachment section and you said, hey, I see attachment 1, 3, and 4, attachment 2 is the scope bid form, and that's going to be in the work category specific document, so you're not missing it, it's in there. And if you look through the exhibit documents and you said exhibit A is missing, exhibit A is the scope of work directive, that's also within the work category specific documents and not included in the exhibit folder.
Yep.
All right, cool.
Perfect.
All right, bid submissions by selection method. So this applies to all bids. Everyone who's submitting a bid needs to complete the bid form that includes initialing all of the acknowledgement boxes as well as signing the bottom of the bid form and submitting that to us before the due date on November 4th. Need to be pre-qualified by Sunk Construction, registered with SAM.gov with no active exclusions. And there's a Exhibit T, which is the voluntary escalation or de-escalation program. That's not necessarily required to submit with your bid, but if you do want to participate in the program, then that form needs to be included at the time of bid.
Yeah, we'll go over that escalation de-escalation program here in a little bit, but there is a line that says that you request to volunteer or you do not wish to volunteer. So that's why we do ask that you take a look at that, sign it, send it back to us.
If you fail to turn in the voluntary escalation or de-escalation program, then by default, you will be excluded from the program. Low bid, as we previously said, send to upload to Smart Bid. Alternatively, you can send it to orwater@sunt.com. We'll receive the low bid that method. If it's a best value package, there's the email address again for sending it directly to the Willamette water supply. The instructions were back in the instructions to bidders for how those PDFs need to be provided. And the additional document that's included as part of the best value package is that statement of qualifications. Each one of the work category specific documents has a specific set of instructions for that statement of qualifications and what needs to be included in it. All right, and then I'll hand this back over to Mike to cover the pre-qualification process.
All right. So SUNT pre-qualification process, it's really a simple process but the purpose of it is to ensure that all subcontractors are meeting the minimum threshold to perform and execute the work according to SUNT's expectations. So one thing to reiterate, pre-qualification is not required for manufacturers, or if you're just simply providing services only. This is for subcontracted work. So if you're performing labor on site, you're required to go through the pre-qualification process. So each bidder shall go through the be pre-qualified through our web-based process. The pre-qual process requires, at a minimum, an insurance cert to be provided, safety record, and project record for up to $250,000, and project records to receive up to $250,000 approval. If you need to get above that $250,000 threshold, then you'll need to potentially provide additional information, usually a letter from your surety and some financial statements, basically to make sure that for us to be able to ensure that your firm is financially stable and able to handle the project scope of this size. Any questions or comments that you have can be sent directly to prequal@subqual-llc.com or call this 1-800 phone number. And to begin the process is very simple. Just go to www.sunt.com/subcontractor-portal. And that'll bring you right to a simple web page where you just start entering the information. Usually takes about 24 to 48 hours to complete the process.
The only thing I'd add to this is I've gotten a number of questions, so I wanted to reiterate it during this meeting, is that Subqual LLC is a wholly owned subsidiary of SUNT. They provide the results of the pre-qualification to SUNT, but they do not share the financial documents with SUNT. So if necessary, you can request a non-disclosure agreement. A lot of times people are nervous about sharing financials, especially people who are in direct competitors with SUNT don't want to share financial information. Subqual LLC will sign a non-disclosure agreement upon request and negotiation to ensure the privacy of any of your financial information.
Great point. Thanks, Jared. All right, moving on to the bid form. So as Jared had mentioned earlier, so in each of the, when you log into Smart Bid, you'll see that scopes of work, and then underneath each folder work category package has a bid form, has the scope of work, and if it's a best value if it's a best value work category, it has the SOQ for the qualifications. So we want to spend a little bit of time to go through the bid form. Most of the bid forms have the same exact layout other than some of the WBS line items that we ask you to add pricing to. Varies from form to form, but primarily they're all the same. So we're just going to go through here. We do want to reiterate that each bid form is unique. So what we ask is that if you're bidding on, let's say, concrete, for example, that you're utilizing the correct concrete bid package. And what makes it unique is, one is the title at the very top there. It has the bid package that it applies to. So make sure you're not grabbing, let's say, 09900 for painting and submitting it for something else, because it'll get misappropriated when we do our qualification, or when we do our side-by-side abstracting. It just won't function correctly. So make sure you're using the correct one. So at the very top here, it's got the bid package that you're applying to, as well as the bid due date. Scrolling down a little bit, under section 1 is the bidding information of your firm. Next is a little confirmation section that is asking you to confirm that you've reviewed the sample, either purchase order or subcontract agreement, and that if you have reviewed it and agreed to it, if you have reviewed it and have provided redline copies, or that you've provided a list of specific exemptions to the sample form agreement. And we ask that you sign and date this section right here. Next is scope of work. So here we ask that any addendum that are issued, that you recognize that you received the addendum and the date. Under section 3 is the bid price. So here we're asking 3.1 that you provide us the bottom line dollar value of what it is for that scope of work. And then in 3.2, we're asking you to break down your bid down into multiple line items here. And this is done with a specific purpose to be able to make the abstracting process or the comparing of bidder to bidder much easier on some estimating to be able to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples. Because obviously, if we just said, give us a single bottom line number and that's it, then it makes it very difficult to be able to make sure that everyone's incorporated all of the scope of work that's required.
Yeah, just to be clear, we're not issuing these as unit price contracts. These are going to be lump sum agreements.
Good point. Yep. Keep scrolling. So here, alternate pricing. So as we mentioned earlier, there are 7 recognized bid alternates. And we do provide space here that for you to add in pricing, either if it's a negative number that you add into here, we consider that as a deductive price, or if it's a positive number, it's the additive price. And we do recognize that the bid documents currently the documents show the drawings show all of the alternates in detail, but we're going to provide a summary, a better summary coming out here in the addendum number 1 for each of these alternates to help the bidders thoroughly understand the scope of work for each of these alternates. And then in some bid forms, there are alternates. Instead of 1, 2, and 3, there's alternates like A, B, C, and those are specific to the given bid form. And really, I think there's only 4 bid forms that this applies to. So if you have one of those, just please read those thoroughly and provide us a price accordingly. We also have an area here for voluntary alternates. The owner and Sunt are very open to figuring out ways to be able to lower the price of the project. So this is where we're allowing you all to think outside the box and let us know where there's potential cost savings through the design or through the specs that we could take in consideration. So we allow you here a couple areas to be able to add in alternates. So feel free to put a detailed description of what voluntary alternate you're recommending and a price associated with that. One thing to reiterate on all the alternates is that the alternates will all be additive alternates. So please do not include them in your line item number that was your bottom line number that was in 3.0. All the alternates will be considered independent of your bottom line number, your abstracted number.
One thing I wanted to add here on the voluntary alternates is, like Mike said, these are your potential value engineering ideas to improve the cost. We mentioned substitutions for like manufacturers earlier. Our preference is that those substitution requests are submitted prior to the bid so that we can give the owner and engineer time to evaluate if they would consider those.
3.4, markups and fees for change order work. So here we just want to reiterate, this is shown in the contract as well as Exhibit B1, but B1 and B2, but we just want to reiterate that there's a 10% and a 5% markup, 10% for self-performed work and 5% for subcontracted work, allowable per the contract for all trades. 4.0 is just listing out some MeBe, Weebie, DBE, and veteran participation. So if you have anyone that's either your firm yourself or second and third tier subcontractors, let us know the percentage of what that is, and that percentage is based on dollar value. And then also the bottom line there is the dollar value associated within the net bid that falls within that category. As we mentioned earlier, there is no goal for MeBe, Weebie, DBE participation, but we're definitely encourage the use of small businesses as much as possible. So, but I will say this does not change the weighting of when it comes to assessing any of the cost abstracts. Number 5, acknowledgements. This is a fairly lengthy, but basically we want to make sure that you're reviewing all of the documents, and that's really what this is. It's more of a checklist to make sure that you all have reviewed each of the exhibits, that you have confirmed that you've read the subcontracts, and that's basically what each one of these are. So we just ask that you initial by each one of these to say that, yep, you've reviewed it, as well as subcontractor qualification forms. And then 6.0 is kind of an open-ended area of where we allow each of the bidders to provide qualifications to your bid or exemptions that you may have. So 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3, we just ask that you feel free to add as much detail in there that you need. This is where you can be able to add lines into the bid form as appropriate, based on your scope of work and your clarifications. 6.4 and 6.5, we ask that that you provide lead times for shop drawings and submittals, as well as your fabrication and delivery time. This helps us iron out our P6, our schedule, and we want to make sure that we're aligning our schedule with the durations that you all feel is appropriate for those, because we all know that durations have drastically increased for certain scopes of work over the past year and a half during COVID, and some are continuing to increase. So we just ask that you all just convey that information to us, so that way we can align it with the schedule. And then 6.6 is qualifications or exemptions that you all have to the standard form of agreement, so to SUNT's standard either purchase order or subcontract. This is where you would add any exemptions, qualifications, or exemptions that you have. And then last but not least, Section 7 is really just having a designated individual from your firm to sign off and date the bid. All right, moving on to bid addendum. So all bid addendum will be issued via SmartBid. So when we upload a bid addendum into SmartBid, we will also send out electronic email notification through SmartBid to everyone that's in the system. So and we'll just basically say, you know, here's where the addendum is located in SmartBid. RFI deadline is October 21st. So this gives us some time to be able to answer any RFIs and roll them into the final addendum, which will be issued no later than October 29th. And as we just went through on the bid form, bidders must acknowledge all addenda on the bid form that we just reviewed. All right, moving on to bid evaluations. So as we mentioned earlier, we go through a bid. Once we receive all the bids for a given scope of work, we'll go through and do an abstracting process or side-by-side evaluation. And what we want to make sure is that we're comparing apples to apples across all bidders to ensure that the scope of work is captured. And monetization of bidders' exclusions to level bids. And what that means is if you were to exclude a specific portion of the scope of work, or a line item of the scope of work, then we have to cover that cost. So what we will do is we'll figure out what the reasonable cost is to be able to cover that specific exclusion and plug it in. And that allows us to be able to do a side-by-side comparison for the entire scope of work. So we highly encourage that that you all price the scope of work as it's written, because when exclusions are made, we do have to go through and plug in costs to those exclusions to ensure that we have a complete scope of work, where your competitors may have that exclusion picked up, and we cannot guarantee that our price will be lower than theirs for that specific line item. Best value packages will have a qualification process requirement along with the bid abstracting. So to address the comment that was made by Cupertino earlier, is we'll get the pricing, we'll abstract it, do the side-by-side comparison, and then at that point, whoever is the low bid will get full points, so full 650 points. And then whoever is second will get a percentage of the points based on percentage lower than they are from the first place or lowest price firm. All right, so let's take a look here at what the abstracting means. So this is a sample abstract that we do. Scroll down here. So what we'll do is we will go through and do a side-by-side comparison of bidder 1 to bidder 2. And as I mentioned earlier, if there happens to be a scope that is excluded, specifically excluded, we will plug in price on your behalf to ensure that the scope is covered. And we want to be able to make sure that also, on this bid scope or on this abstract, we'll also make sure that that all of the other exhibits that you've acknowledged all the exhibits. I'll say if you do not initial or check off that you've acknowledged the exhibits, similar to addenda, that will is a breaking point for us on accepting bids. So please make sure that you go through and review all of the exhibits and sign off on those, so we can be able to make sure that they get signed off on the acknowledged on the abstract. All right. Moving on to exhibits and attachments.
All right, so these are the exhibits and attachments that are all included in SmartBid. I'm going to go through a number of these, and similar to the instructions to bidders, try and highlight a couple of the key points in there. To repeat myself again, all exhibits will be included in the contract. The attachments are only going to be during the bidding phase, so you can look at that separation of the nomenclature a little bit differently like that. So first one I'm going to open up is the bid alternates matrix. There we go. All right, so the bid alternates matrix, we lay out all of the work categories in here, as well as the 7 alternates that were identified in the summary of work, specification 011100, and in the relevant places in the drawings. What we're trying to do here is identify each work package's assignment to each one of the alternates and lay that out. All alternates are meant to be additive. So again, your base bid price should not include the changes described by the alternate. The alternate's extra. If the owner chooses to employ an alternate or select an alternate, then that alternate price, whether positive or minus, will be added to that base bid price when we issue the subcontract agreement. So the matrix represents Sun's analysis of the alternates and the potential impacts to the scopes. It's still the responsibility of each one of these work categories to review the alternates to make sure that if they have scope in there, that they've appropriately priced that alternate. Scope bid form was the attachment 2. We reviewed that one previously, so I'm not going to go through that one. Attachment 3 and 4 are the sample forms of agreements. whether a purchase order or subcontract agreement. So for our purposes today, I'm just going to open up the sample form of subcontract agreement. So this would be the version of the contract that you would receive if you're awarded the job for a subcontract. Encourage you to go through this, and if you or your team decides that there's any exceptions or clarifications needed in the contract, you can either identify those on the bid form or you can redline this agreement. I would encourage you to use exact language that you would request to be put in here, rather than a general statement about requesting a change to a specific section. It'll help the negotiations go a little bit smoother and help us understand your position on the subcontract agreement terms and conditions a little bit more clearly. Specifically with the contract, I'm just going to highlight a couple sections in here. I don't want to go through this in a whole lot of detail. So section 3.3 is the subcontract documents. This is where we'll, all of those exhibits that you saw, those will ultimately all be listed as a subcontract document here. The drawings are listed within Exhibit E, so those are going to be as part of the 3.3 subcontract documents. Any of the specific inclusions or exclusions that we agree with you on your bid form and negotiate, those will appear in here. The inclusions and exclusions as they apply to the total work package will be in your Exhibit A, scope of work, and that's going to stand exactly as it is, plus or minus any addenda. So this is negotiation specifically with each contractor as they are awarded the contract. If there's any clarifications that are required on the subcontract agreement to the terms and conditions, those are going to appear at the very last paragraph right above the signature line. So as you're going through this, just instructions when we do that, each page will need to be initialed, and the final section down here for the signature page. And to reiterate it just one more time, when we issue this for final signature, we don't allow markups on the final issue of the subcontract agreement. Anything that we need to negotiate needs to be incorporated into the clarifications, inclusions, or exclusions. So we'll prepare a clean copy for execution when we send it out. Next up was a scope of work directive to give you a sample of kind of what one of those looks like. So picking on concrete a little bit more. So this is 0300.1 concrete, the same work category that we displayed the bid form for. Section 1 is the specification section. So as we went through each one of these work categories, we identified the specification sections as they directly relate to the work category. Each subcontractor or bidder proposing on it is responsible for understanding those sections as well as all of the contract documents. Documents and reports, this used to be a lengthy section. If anybody's bid on any of Sun's projects in the past, we've condensed that all and included it in Exhibit E instead. Section 3 is the trade-specific scope inclusions.
Yep.
So, go ahead, Mike.
So the trade-specific scope inclusions are meant to be further clarifications to the scope. So as Jared showed earlier, we've gone through painstaking detail to illustrate what specifications apply to this given scope of work. So based on what the scope of work entails and those specifications, we expect that you have all of the entirety of the specifications in addition to these trade-specific inclusions. So these trade-specific inclusions are meant to provide greater detail or additional items that are not currently called out in the specifications.
Thanks, Mike. So this is the bulk of the SOW with the inclusions that are going to be in here. Took some time to go through this to build out all of the list of these inclusions. The next section in here is general inclusions. So this, again, used to be a lengthy section within our agreements. We've taken that all and put it into Exhibit B.2 or B.1 special project requirements. Those general inclusions are things that apply to either all subcontracts or all purchase orders, respectively.
Yep. And then in exclusions, we again took a lot of time to make sure that if something didn't apply to a given scope of work, we made sure that we wrote it in as an exclusion. And for a good example here is, I'll take a look here at 5.2, furnishing of masonry reinforcement. So in this given scope of work, we have it that the concrete company owes installation of masonry reinforcement, but the mason ultimately owns furnishing it. So we wanted to show here that in the exclusions of concrete, we have that that this item is specifically excluded, but that in the masonry scope of work, it is specifically included. So we've done this to make sure that the gaps are covered in between the individual scopes of work.
Under each one of the exclusions, I want to point out 5.1, performance and payment bonds. So SUNT will be using our internal subcontractor default insurance in lieu of performance and payment bonds on the project. So we've excluded the cost of performance and payment bonds for all subcontractors. We talked a little bit about the pre-qualification process. In the event that your firm is selected as the low bidder and you're on the borderline of being eligible for our subcontractor default insurance program after the pre-qualification process, this final exclusion may be shifted to requiring your company provide a bond in lieu of subcontract default insurance. But as a baseline, we're going to exclude performance and payment bonds. There is an Oregon requirement for a bond of a public works bond. That is a requirement of each subcontractor to carry as part of doing their work. Last section in here is going to be alternates. So that attachment 1 laid out the bid alternate matrix. We also laid it out in here for clarification. Next one is Exhibit B.1 and B.2. As I mentioned previously, B.1 and B.2 differ based off of which one is a subcontract agreement and a purchase order. B.1 is for purchase orders, and B.2 is for subcontract agreements. So these are the basically the general instructions for all subcontractors or all purchase order on the jobs as they apply to everybody. So rolling quickly through this. So the general section up at the top is going to cover job site communications, flow through language from the prime contracts, how we're going to handle payments, retention, and basic job site expectations, rules, and behaviors on the job site. You know, no offensive logos, clothing, things like that. So it also lays out a section on the liquidated damages as they would apply as a flow-through item on the job,
specifically for B.2, it does discuss about crane usage. So it is intent that SUNT will be providing cranes on the job, and there's a section in here that's very specific that says exactly what cranes we're providing. So at the main process building, we do intend to provide a tower crane, a single tower crane, and then we'll be providing 3 additional mobile RT cranes to support the other structures. So pay attention to Exhibit B.2. That there's language in there. It says how, you know, what the size of these cranes are going to be, capacity of them, as well as the duration we intend to have them on site.
Yeah, as Mike said, look at that closely because that shows you what we're providing, what they can be used for, the capacity. If you have needs that are beyond what we're providing, then you as a subcontractor will need to provide that for your work.
So there's some specific language related to the drug testing program that's required on the job site for each subcontractor to make sure that they have included as part of their program. This is a section on the liquidated damages as a flow through from the prime contract. The complete flow through section on the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act program. The language that is right here that needs to be carried through both to our first tier subcontractors as well as ultimately if you end up subcontracting out a portion of your work, there's some of this flow through language that needs to go down to tiered subcontractors as well. There's some BIM requirements on the job, so building information modeling. Specific work categories are required to provide a model or a drafter. Those requirements are laid out in Exhibit M. Right here tells you which of the work categories needs to participate in that. It's also laid out in your scope of work directive that says that you need to provide a BIM modeler for each one of these work packages. So there's repetition within here. Section 3 is the section that Mike and Dave were talking about in terms of coordination and logistics. So in addition to the cranes and how we're going to be handling that as a CMGC, it'll cover all of the temporary utilities, porta-johns, tent facilities that we're going to have on the job site, dumpsters. It'll cover access, staging, storage, the working hours for the project. One other thing that I wanted to point out for you is cleanup on here. So we have we're intending on using a composite cleanup crew to help clean up messes or work that isn't directly attributable to any specific work category. We'll need to keep this job site clean. SUNS has a policy of relentless housekeeping to make sure that our job sites are some of the cleanest job sites that anybody's ever stepped on. So this is a key component to making sure that we can maintain a job site that's in good, clean order and keep everybody safe. The other section in here is on supervision. So we have a section here on expectations of the supervisor on a job site. So if your supervisor on the job site is expected to perform certain things on the job site, this kind of lays out our expectations for what a supervisor needs to be doing, what they're going to be responsible for. Quality as its own exhibit, we lay it out briefly here on the expectations of our quality program. There's a number of work packages that are going to require mock-ups. Those are included in each individual statement of work, as well as the general statement here in Exhibit B for what those mock-ups are. We have a section on a schedule on how we intend on executing the schedule for this project. As part of the due out from subcontractors, as you're looking through it to evaluate that schedule, take a look at it and provide any feedback on that schedule. And this also lays out how we intend on making modifications or coordination to the schedule as work progresses. Here's those holidays again with the addendum. We'll add Juneteenth on there. We have a section on here on project closeout, commissioning, and startup. So if your scope of work requires you to provide closeout materials, record drawings, O&M manuals, warranties, spare parts, extra materials, that's all laid out right in here. Again, this is supplementary to the contract documents. The specific requirements for by specification are laid out in the specification for what's required for O&M startup training and spare materials. Finally, we got a section on safety and environmental plans. So this is a very high-level view of the safety environmental controls. The one that I'd like to point out is we have a number of environmental plans that we included in Exhibit E for you to take a look at. So those are specific plans that we've prepared in advance for the project to make sure the site stays in compliance and we're treating the environment as it needs to be treated respectfully.
Yeah, another item to point on here, 8.2, right where the cursor is at, we'll go through the site logistics drawings here in a little bit, but we want to point out that there are some high voltage PG power lines that cross the southern half of the property. Those power lines are in excess of 130 kV and must remain operational throughout construction. There is one section that we've identified that does come down within about 30 feet from final grade. So in that specific area, trades that are performing work, it's above a roadway that we have to build. So trades working in that specific area will have to take precautions and planning appropriately when working in that area.
We're working on developing a badging program for the project. Anticipate that the project will have a badging program for everybody. Employees will be issued a badge after they've completed orientation. In here it lays out that subcontractors need to assume a minimum number of hours for that on-site orientation for safety and environmental training. There's a couple items that are owner-furnished items, and that's the final section of Exhibit B.1. So if you see these in the documents, they're there for reference or information only. These are going to be provided by the owner. All right, project schedule. We looked at that. I'm not going to go through that one in specific detail, but know that that's included in Exhibit C for you to take a look at, provide comment and feedback on. Exhibit D is our safety management and illness prevention requirements. So we provided this exhibit as well with our draft safety management and illness prevention stage. We'll finalize it as we close in. There's a number of sections in the safety management and illness prevention plan that require specific inclusion of subcontractors, who they are and who their people are. So as we finish laying out the job, we'll finalize this plan and get it incorporated, but the major components of what needs to be incorporated from a pricing standpoint and for you to comply with our safety program are included here.
Yeah. So our take on our safety program is that our plan is the bare minimum of what you shall do. Now, if your firm has internal safety policies that go above and beyond stunts, we are more than willing to adopt those or to support you on that. But we require that our safety plan is the bare minimum of what your firm shall be restricted to.
In addition to the safety management and illness prevention plan within Exhibit D, you'll also find our safe work procedures. So a number of the activities that are typically high risk or have resulted in injuries or incidences, SUNS has developed a number of safe work procedures that lay out in a little bit more detail exactly how we expect those activities to be performed. And as Mike said, those are the bare minimum expectations to be performed. If your firm has a more rigorous safety program for those specific items like fall protection, we're more than willing to review and adopt those programs as part of this. Just while we're on the safety management page, just wanted to reiterate again some of the top safety challenges that we see for the project. The high power lines that we mentioned previously, we'll look at those. Working along 124th Avenue, so the project where it's located, there's some a couple roads that are adjacent to the project. There's some scopes of work that are going to be required to work adjacent or under 124th Avenue. So we'll be specifically looking for those work packages and making sure that that work is performed safely. The site is heavily forested, and they used a term on the site of arborized poison oak. So for the first trades that are going to come in there, that's going to be a concern for making sure that we keep everybody safe with poison oak. With that 124th Avenue entering and exiting the site, we've taken some specific provisions within our logistics plan to make sure that we can enter and exit the site safely. And then blasting is a significant component of our safety plan as well. So with that subsurface soil condition of basalt and rock through most of the site, blasting is going to be required, so we've addressed that within our safety plan as well. All right. Exhibit E is your list of documents. It's the library for the project. As we issue bid addenda, those will be added to your Exhibit E. We have some model files that can be provided for reference, Navisworks, CAD, as well as Revit. There's some reference documents and reports. We mentioned the environmental plans. Those are included up here prepared by Wildwood Environmental. The geotechnical reports for both the site and 124th Avenue. We've prepared a startup and commissioning plan that's going to be relevant for a couple of those work categories to include provisions related to. And a bankful memo, again, related to the startup and commissioning process for how we're going to be handling water on the job site for testing. You have a package of specifications. There is a set of specifications for security. Those are in SmartBid secured out so that not everybody has access to those security documents.
If you feel that you require access to those security documents, please contact us. We do have to review that with the clients to make sure that there is good cause for sharing that. But right now, the electrical work category package is the only one that has the view-only access. So again, if you require access, please reach out to us, and we will see how we can get that to you.
There's a couple work packages, specifically the ballast and flocculation equipment, UV reactor, and screw press that were critical to developing the design. So those were designated as early works packages. So Westech, Calgon Carbon, and FKC respectively started developing submittals for those to be incorporated into the final design. Those submittals are included for your reference as well if you need to review them as part of developing your pricing. And then we have a list of all the attachments and exhibits that are going to be included as well. Supplemental insurance requirements is Exhibit F. So Exhibit F, within your subcontractor purchase order agreement, it lays out the insurance requirements. This Exhibit F lays out specifically which policy and requirements for how we're going to view those insurance certificates. So take a look at this. There's a couple things on here that are going to be critical for review. Specifically, we have a number of endorsements that need to be included with each insurance package. The one that I want to bring to your attention is this matrix that we included at the back of Exhibit F. The subcontractor purchase order agreement have a section in there on insurance, and sometimes it is unclear depending on the scope of work which that you're performing, whether or not you need to provide a specific insurance policy or not. This matrix right here clarifies the subcontracts and purchase order agreements, and specifically indicates which work category package needs to provide which insurance. Additionally, our prime contract has some flow down language for minimum insurance requirements. So those are clarified in here as well about which work packages need to include insurance at a specific level.
Yep.
So specifically, the prime contract, if you look at it, has a $25 million umbrella policy. We recognize that not everybody needs to carry $25 million of umbrella insurance policy. So that's clarified in here about the expectation for exactly how much insurance each work package is expected to have on it.
Yep. And similarly with pollution liability insurance, only select work categories require pollution liability insurance. Professional liability insurance, as you can see, it's the far two right-hand columns. Most all work categories are required to provide that. And the reasoning for that is going back to earlier in our presentation where we talked about seismic design requirements and delegated design requirement. There are pretty numerous amount of submittals and designs that have to be done for each work category package or throughout the project. So we're asking that that everyone provides professional liability insurance as it applies if you have to provide either delegated design or seismic design.
Lean construction is something that SUNT has used for the last couple of years. Now how we manage both our long-range and short-term schedules. So this Exhibit G, Lean construction, talks about how we manage those schedules. It's specifically the last planner system of Lean construction. We'll do a weekly work plan. So all trades will turn in a weekly work plan for the work they intend on doing for the next week. And then we will evaluate the previous week's work plan to see if we were able to accomplish everything that we had planned on doing.
If you are unfamiliar with the Lean construction process, that's not a problem. We will go through a training process with you and your frontline supervisors to make sure that it's clear of what it is. And really the main purpose of this is trying to keep all trades as efficient as possible and eliminating the issues of the small, minute issues that end up holding up either your own work or other trades' work. So we try to manage that on a weekly basis through multiple methods that are prescribed in the Lean process.
So take a look at that. Exhibit. It lays out kind of some of the details on a couple of those things. We'll ultimately provide training on the job site to help whatever on-site supervision you have help participate in this program and keep everybody efficient and minimize as much waste and inefficiency as possible. Textura. So for our agreements, we use Textura as our payment management system. So Textura does a couple of things for us. It tracks our schedule of values, payments. You'll submit your payment application using Textura. Textura also helps manage compliance, specifically as it relates to lien waivers and insurance certificates. So it tracks the expiration date for each of the insurance certificates and makes sure that all of that information is kept up to date and the project stays within compliance with those requirements. Totally electronic system, so you'll sign pay applications and submit electronically. You'll receive your payments via automatic clearinghouse transfers. The one thing to keep in mind as you look at this, there is a small fee associated with using Textura for the subcontractors. It's laid out right here, so it's going to be 0.22% of your contract value up to a maximum of $3,750. SUNT also provided the quality management plan in Exhibit I. I'll highlight a couple of things here within Exhibit I, what the quality management plan is going to lay out for you, specifically how we expect to plan the work and work the plan. So within here, you'll find our requirement for work packages, planning the work, preparatory meetings, pre-installation conferences, and how we'll handle checklists and inspections.
Yep. And similar to the safety plan, as we mentioned earlier, that this is the minimum requirement, right? So if your firm has additional processes that you've adopted that go above and beyond, then we are more than willing to acknowledge those and accept those. But we want to make sure that that everyone has a firm foundation on quality and safety, and only build up from there.
Exhibit J is our prime contract. I didn't include it to go through today. Our subcontract agreements and purchase order agreement do include flow down language from the prime contract and reference the prime contract and incorporate it in its entirety. It's available for your review as in Exhibit J, in addition to all of the change orders that have been executed to date. Those are included on the back side of the prime contract. The only thing that is not included is we redacted some of the dollar language. So if you see some black boxes in there, that's the dollars that have been redacted. So it is not redacting any critical information. Exhibit K is additional contract requirements. So whenever we issue these subcontracts and purchase orders for execution, there's a number of documents and forms that need to be executed. An I-9 Code of Safe Practices, which lays out SUN's basic rules for safety on the job site. A minority status form. So just a couple documents that we'll have filled out whenever we actually execute these contracts.
Yep.
Exhibit L is the WFIA program requirements. So Exhibit L, N, O, P, and Q are all components of the WFIA program. So within Exhibit L, this is the total layout of the program for the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. The project is receiving funding through this program, and so there's like I said, there's a couple things that we need to comply with as a component of receiving that funding. There's a couple federal laws that specifically are going to apply to the project. There's the Economic and Miscellaneous Authority, so we talked about the wage rate determinations. There's some non-discrimination language that needs to be included in our agreement with you, as well as your agreement with any tiered subcontractors, and then the requirements for the American Iron and Steel and the federal labor standards. So all of that is available for you to review within this Exhibit L. Again, I'll reiterate that there's no DBE or MBE requirements in the project. We are going to track DBE and MBE participation. The WFIA program does lay out a minimum goals for workforce participation, 4.5% for minority workforce participation goal, and a 6.5% for female participation in the workforce goal. Exhibit N is our building information modeling requirements. So again, here's the work categories that need to participate in our building information modeling program. Those the baseline model was provided by CD and Smith. Our expectation is that as subcontractors develop their shop drawings, that they'll submit the model version of their shop drawings to us. We'll take SUNT as the CMGC, we'll take that model together, incorporate it, do clash detection, and then work with each one of the trades to mitigate clash detection and incorporate the elements of the model.
Yeah, one of the things that's important in this document is we also lay out the which trade takes priority over others, which in a architectural type commercial building, typically architectural takes a higher precedence in things. In this wastewater facility, obviously the process takes priority, and so we have it listed out in this document of kind of what that flow down is of which trade takes priority over another. The only place where architectural does take a higher precedence is in the administration building, where obviously that is more of a commercial structure than it is a process plant structure. So just pay attention to that, because that's what we will be abiding to when we go through and do our clash detection.
Appendix A, certification regarding lobbying. This is one of the requirements of the WIFIA program. So as we execute these contract agreements, there's a certification regarding lobbying that will need to be executed by your company and provided to SUNT before we can proceed. Same with Appendix B to Part 34, disclosure form to report lobbying. The second half of that same form for a specific disclosure on lobbying activities. Exhibit P is the wage determination. So this wage determination was provided effective September 16 of this year. And this will be applicable for the life cycle of the project. Each subcontractor is required to pay the minimum of, or the greater, not the minimum, the greater of either BOLI or the Davis-Bacon wage.
Correct. So pay special attention to this. As Jared mentioned, that effectively we're locked into these two labor rate tables that are provided in this exhibit. So in the event of where you have the same trade listed in either one, as Jared mentioned, we have to pay the higher of the two as a minimum. So if your firm chooses to pay above that, that's okay, but that sets ultimately your minimum what you must pay.
Exhibit Q is the certification letter. Use of American iron and steel. So with each one of those iron and steel products that's provided on the project, it requires some tracking paperwork to go with it to verify that it was in fact provided and is in compliance with the American Iron and Steel Act and the WIFIA program. All right, Exhibit R is our construction management plan. And I'll let Mike cover this one.
Yeah. So this is our site logistics plans. We want to share this with everyone. We've provided a couple drawings here. It's kind of our phasing that we expect the plant to go in. So this first drawing is really our initial clear and grub that we have to perform. As we mentioned earlier, it's a heavily wooded site right now. So we have to go through and remove about 23 acres of trees from the facility or from the area. So this line or this drawing here just simply shows that first initial step. One important thing to show on every single one of these logistics drawings, you see this the large yellow shaded area that kind of cuts diagonally across the site. That is the public utility easement of the PGE high voltage lines. So any work that follows underneath those areas. Ultimately, we have to coordinate that work with PGE, especially as we get close within the lines themselves. The next drawing here, this shows kind of our site logistics plans during blasting and crushing. So during this period of phase, we'll establish a crushing and temporary stockpile facility on site. With the main area north of the PGE lines will be the main area where all the crushing and drilling and blasting will be occurring. There is some drilling and blasting that also occurs along 124th. So the respective bidders do need to take into account of probably having to coordinate with the city of Sherwood and possibly Washington County for doing some traffic control along 124th, and depending, during those blasting periods of possibly having to shut down traffic, and maintaining that. So that is ultimately the responsibility of the contractor performing said work. This plan is the site logistics drawing during excavation and early underground scopes of work. So we've identified where we expect some deep excavations to occur on the site, and also we're starting to establish some more roadways on the project. So these we will establish temporary roads throughout the project, and as well as start establishing a large staff and employee parking area on the south side, which is the bright green area. We also have allocated areas for where subcontractor and the CMGC and owner trailers will be established. Next drawing. All right. So this drawing here is the temporary water distribution plan. So this is a rough drawing that we've put together, a plan that we've put together. This scope is ultimately the responsibility of work category 3100, which is the earthwork and yard piping scope of work. We've written that this is the responsibility of that contractor. But we indicate on here the point of connection for this temporary facility, and then where the temporary lines eventually need to bring water to certain to specific points of connection for temporary use. So make sure if you're bidding that 3100 scope of work, make sure you review this accordingly. Any permits that are required or any design drawings that are required that need to get permitted is ultimately the responsibility of the earthwork contractor. This next drawing is our temporary site electrical and distribution plan. Similar to the temporary water, this plan, temporary site electrical is rolled into as the responsibility of work category 2600, which is the electrical. We've been working with PGE throughout design to provide us a point of connection for both temporary and permanent electrical connections. And so we've put together a fairly rough logistics drawing of where we need to have power distributed to throughout the site, as well as we do provide a one-line diagram that shows what power requirements we're needing, where, and for what. So we just ask that if you're bidding the electrical 2600 scope of work, you pay great attention to these drawings associated with the temporary site electrical. This goes along with the site electrical. This is a drawing from PGE that was provided that indicates the points of connection for both the temporary and the permanent electrical sources. This is a one line for the temporary electrical system, and it kind of explains of how we see it, but ultimately the design and permitting is the responsibility of the electrician. And finally, this is our site logistics plan. After blasting, crushing, and excavation is complete, and the structures are coming up out of the ground, this is how we ultimately see that the site logistics will be laid out. So as you can see, I'll start at the bottom portion south of the PGE lines. The admin and craft parking lot is fully established. We have multiple trailers established down there as well, single wide trailers, as well as the owners and CMGC's trailers. We also have established areas of where connexes can be set up. We also indicate on here where the tower crane is, and also the mobile cranes that we anticipate to be providing. And as we mentioned earlier, that is all detailed out in Exhibit B.2 for subcontractors. We will also be providing you can see there the large squares there that shows the 100 by 100 red square and 100 by 100 orangish yellow colored square. Those we're going to be providing a large Quonset hut type tent for one for a on-site warehouse for storing of materials and equipment, and then also another one for a lunch tent and basically all hands meeting room. One important note to point out here is this is illustrated in B.2 as well, but we are implementing a right-hand turn only as you're exiting the facility. And that's mainly for safety purposes. With the amount of traffic we're anticipating coming on and off the site at any given day, we want to make sure that as we're leaving the site, we're not crossing oncoming traffic, which could potentially pose as a hazard not only for our employees but also for the public. So we will be implementing a right-hand turn only. We will establish signage along with that, and some policing of that if required.
One thing I'll just add here, and Mike touched on it, is how a lot of these temporary facilities are called out in the various work categories like the electrical and the yard pipe. So when you see, in the earthwork work category, a paragraph or an inclusion requiring you to put down temporary roads or anything like that, you can refer back to these drawings to show the layout of where those will go.
Yep.
Exhibit S is our scope delineation document. So with the requirement to trade off a couple different scopes between specific areas, we thought we'd lay this document out to help provide that clearly. So the first set of documents is for concrete scope. So there's 3 concrete packages as well as the pre-stressed tank. So this color-coded diagram explains which concrete structures belong in each one of the work category packages. And it is bookmarked for your convenience. Second set of documents is the in, under, around documents. So with the underground piping, as well as some of the above ground process piping, we needed to delineate the point where yard piping is completed, and either plumbing or process mechanical picks up the scope from there. Within the SOW, it says that yard piping owes this piping to within 15 feet of the building or to the first flange as it stubs up inside the building. So to help clarify that a little bit, we laid out here where the expectation is that each one of the trades will pick up and drop off for each one of the lines. And then the final section is instrumentation. So we've provided is both a log as well as marked up process and instrumentation diagrams that lay out the responsibility of who owns which set of instrumentation on the PNID. So it's a color-coded document that shows who owns supplying it and who owns installing it, whether it's an equipment vendor, electrician, or process mechanical or plumber.
Yeah, and we did this just to help clarify, again, who owns responsibility of procuring it, who owns responsibility of installing it, which tends to be, on these type of projects, some areas that can cause gaps. So we want to make sure that it's clear and concise of who owns what.
Last exhibit is the voluntary escalation or de-escalation program. I have an example of this in a later slide, so I'll walk through a detailed example of how this is going to apply. Basically, we know that the market has been volatile. It's been up and down. It's very hard to predict pricing. And ultimately, we want our subcontractors and vendors to provide the best possible pricing for the job and not have to carry the burden of incorporating an unknown level of contingency into their bids. So to help alleviate that requirement, we have this voluntary escalation or de-escalation program. It's going to be done in 3 steps. So the first is, if you choose to participate in this, is establishment of the indices and basis of estimate. So you can go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website and pick up to 5 of the commodity indexes from Table 9. And those will be approved by either SUNT or the Willamette Water Supply. And then within 30 days of notice to award, the selected awardee needs to provide their basis of estimate. So a quote showing the unit price, quantities, and each line item associated with the PPI that they selected as part of their bid process. The next step is determination of merit. So when that producer price index increases or decreases by more than 5% from the baseline month, that triggers whether or not we're going to allow for there to be a change order relative to escalation. So we gave a small example here. This bidder selected non-current carrying wire devices. In April, they submitted their bid, and it had a producer price index of 156.1. By August, that increased to 178, which is a 14% increase. So yes, they would get merit. So if they end up incurring some additional costs for these other non-current carrying wire devices, we would be allowed to provide them with a change order. On the other hand, ready mix only increased 2.1%, and they would not be allowed a change order for any material that they purchased relative to ready mix concrete. Which takes us to the last step. So if there is merit based off of that 5% up or down change, and I guess to be transparent on that one, the expectation is that if there's a decrease that we would be asking for a credit back as well. So that's part of the voluntary program. So the final portion is the adjustment of the subcontract value. So if there is merit for a change, you'll need to provide an executed purchase order showing the difference, showing that same material that you provided in the basis of estimate now has a different price in it, and whatever that difference in price is, that's what we'll provide in change order plus a 5% markup. So right here, we can elect to participate or not participate in the program, sign and date it. If you do elect to participate, please fill out this table with the 5 indexes that you would like to use, that you would like to tie to your bid, and they need to be relative to the materials or equipment or energy that is supplied as part of your scope of work.
So again, this is, as I mentioned previously, this is somewhat of a unusual approach to doing it, but SUNT and the client have spent a lot of time debating this and crafting this in a way that we feel is truly advantageous to the bidders to eliminate carrying escalation on your shoulders and the owner able to manage escalation and or de-escalation as it relates to the consumer price index.
So I'll give you a quick example on the next slide of how the voluntary escalation and de-escalation program will work. So I mentioned 3 basic steps: establishment of the indices and basis of estimate, 2 is determination of merit, and 3 is the adjustment of subcontract value. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes a producer price index on a monthly basis. So as you're evaluating your bids, you would go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website that we provided, take a look at it, and jump down to Table 9. Table 9 lays out the commodities and the commodity codes, and that's what we need to be paying attention to. And it gets very detailed. So from farm products to fruits and melons, fresh fruits, citrus fruits, down to lemons and grapefruits on the front page. As we go a little bit further down, it becomes more construction-specific items. So metal containers, non-ferrous foundry shop products. So there's quite a few pages of documentation here. The expectation is that if you choose to participate in this program, that you'll select 5 of these commodities and commodity codes. So if I'm a subcontractor and I've elected to participate in it, at the bottom of my Exhibit T, I would have, for my bid, I only selected 2 indices, the stainless steel pipe and concrete. Those commodity codes are 1017-0674 and 1333. The specific material that I'm supplying to the project related to it, well, with stainless steel pipe and stainless steel, I'm providing stainless steel pipe. With concrete, with ready-mix concrete, I'm providing concrete to the project. So this is part of the bid process. This needs to be turned in with the bid form. This is basically step 1B. Once you've been notified that you've been awarded, I've been notified that I've been awarded. Within 30 days after the CMGC says you're going to get this contract, I need to provide the basis of estimate. So I'm going to provide the quotes related to those producer price indexes that I selected. So for that first one was pipe. I need to buy 3/16 stainless steel pipe, 4-inch. The job has 100 lineal feet of it, and my bid price was $30.94 for the material. And here's my quote to back that up. Same thing with concrete, 50 cubic yards of concrete at $225 a yard. And here's the quote that I received from a concrete supplier that reflects that $225 price. So that's the basis of estimate. Now fast forward a few months, and I am ready to actually perform the work on site. So my first step is I'm going to go take a look at the newest and latest producer price index. So my first producer price index for stainless steel pipe went from an index of 113.9 to 122.2, which is an increase of 7.29%. So I can request a change order whenever I issue my purchase order to my vendor for stainless steel pipe. So whatever that cost change is for stainless steel pipe, I can recover that change in price. For ready-mix concrete, it only increased 0.44%, so there is no merit on ready-mix concrete. So no change order will be provided for concrete. The final step is adjustment of subcontract value. So we agreed, yes, I am due a change order for stainless steel pipe. So at bid time, I had 100 lineal feet. For today's purchase order that I'm executing, I'm in one work package of the work, so I'm only going to release 75 lineal feet of that pipe on this purchase order that I'm executing. My basis of unit price was $30.94 at bid time. It's now $32.14 for a change in price of $1.20. $1.20 times 75 lineal feet plus that 5% markup allowed on change orders gives me a change order value of $94.50 for my stainless steel pipe.
So, as mentioned earlier, this is somewhat of a unusual approach, but we think it is very fair to both subcontractors and vendors as well as to the clients on managing this volatility that's currently in the market. I think one thing to point out is the fluctuation in percentage of the PPI does not mean that's what the percentage of increase or decrease that you're going to have on your price, right? As Jared mentioned here in this example here, is the price is backed up by the initial quote that you have, and then also by the executed change order, purchase order that you've made with your vendors, right? So you will have to provide your purchase order that you've executed with your vendor to us as backup information for this bid or for this change order.
If you've got questions on this or need us to describe it in further detail, please reach out to Mike, David, or myself, and we can walk through this program with you.
Yep.
All right, that's it for exhibits and attachments. With that, I'll hand it back to Dave.
Sure. So we spent a lot of time going through the documents. In one of our earlier slides, we mentioned delineation between GMP1, GMP2. So before we conclude it and open it up for questions, we just want to highlight that there are going to be future bid opportunities with GMP2, and you can always get updates on the project by going to the Willamette Water Supplies program website, which is ourreliablewater.org. We've got the direct link to the water treatment plant procurements listed right here. But this image that you see on the slide is the homepage. So if you just go to that Our Reliable website, in the top right, you can click on that business opportunities. From there, it'll bring down another drop down, and it'll take you to, or give you an option for water treatment plant procurements. That's where you'll be able to hear about upcoming bid opportunities. We've also got some other good information posted on this site related to the current bid process for GMP1, overview of the project, and some of the information to help you with the pre-qualification process. So all that information is there. out on the internet, and we encourage you to continue to look at that if you're interested in the future bidding opportunities.
And this presentation that we've given today, among the other presentations, are recorded and will be posted to that website.
Yep.
All right, so we spent a lot of time going through the documents. We know that that's some of the drier material with the project, but we felt it was important to go through that because that is some of the information that takes the longest time to get familiar with and understand. So we felt it would be important to focus on that rather than the nuts and bolts of the project. You guys understand your scope of work and how you do that stuff. So again, we felt we would spend the majority of the time on the bid documents and walk you through those. At this point, we would like to open it up for questions. With the amount of people, it may be more efficient to type your question into the chat, but feel free to also mute your line and ask the question. One thing I will say is, the discussions in this pre-bid meeting and potential answers, we don't consider those binding until they are formally addressed in an addendum. So just keep that in mind. And with that, anybody that wishes to ask a question, please feel free or type it into the chat.
Looks like we do have one question here. That are questions due by the 21st or 22nd of October? And I believe it's Thursday the 21st, I believe is what is written.
Yeah, the instructions to bidders call that out as the 21st of October.
Any other questions? Yes, this is it. So we have another question. Is this an AIS project? Yes, it is.
Yeah, and the next question that we received was regarding escalation. And the question is, I think, asking are wage increases part of the escalation? And the answer to that is no, it's strictly material based.
Yep. Any other questions or comments?
All right, so it looks like we got a couple more come in. Valve package will span different work categories. Will I submit per each work category or just one complete package? Those will be per work category package. The process integration has a set inclusion, exclusions for what that scope covers, and so that quote will need to be custom to that work category package.
Yeah, similarly, if you're providing valves also for, let's say, the plumber or for yard piping, those figures would have to be provided to each of one of those work category packages independently.
I may be reading too much into that question, but CMGC is not directly procuring the valves. The valves are procured through a work category, so any quotes for valves would go to one of the bidders for one of those work categories.
Yeah.
Sunt is planning on submitting self-performed bids for the yard piping and process mechanical, so that's where the bid would need to go through.
Sure. Yes, good point. Next item was escalations are based on original and actual invoices, not index. So correct. So the change order will be priced based on the original quote versus the actual purchase order. So whatever your purchase order is with your vendor or subcontractor, we gotta make sure that document has, the specific item that you're requesting escalation on, has to be clearly identified on both documents. That way we could be able to do a side-by-side comparison on the cost, so we can be able to do the change order appropriately.
But the index originally would be what triggered it being with merit, but the numbers would be actual, correct?
Correct, yes. Yep.
Next question was on, as far as bid due dates, as a supplier, we are being asked to submit earlier to the tier 1 subcontractors. Please comment. So Sun is soliciting bids for all the work categories that we listed in the instructions to bidders directly. Those bids that we listed on those instructions to bidders are due November 4th. Any of those work categories are going to necessarily incorporate materials and supplies from other vendors, and the preparation for preparing those other work category packages, they'll need to have that information at some time before November 4th in order to incorporate their information to SUNT. So they will set their own individual due dates for materials or supplies that are incorporated as part of that work package. Yeah, and that would go for not just SUNT, but for any other subcontractor that's bidding the entirety of the scope for a given work category is going to be reaching out to you to request that information earlier so they can incorporate into their final price that's due on November 4th. Next item is on bid, on alternate bid prices on bid form. If subcontractor has no work, do we write 0 or NA? Either one works. 0 or NA is sufficient. On exhibit B, scope delineation, instrumentation log, there are a lot of blank items for who is supplied, installed by. Will this be updated? Yes, we will be issuing an updated instrumentation scope delineation document, hopefully with addendum 1 that's coming out this Friday. Next item is there a reference key for drawings or list of drawing titles?
Specifically in the bid packet on online, we've got a numerical title listed for every drawing, but no indication of what's actually listed on the file type. So without opening every individual drawing, there's no way to know what exactly is on there. Do we have a key or something like that we can reference? Yeah, the index of drawings is, I think it's 01-G-00001 through 9.
Yeah.
So yeah, the index of drawings should be in the 01-G drawings with the very low drawing numbers right after the title page.
Does that answer your question, Chris?
I believe so. Thank you.
Okay. Next item, if a contractor bids on multiple bid packages, would you write separate contracts? No, we would intend to write a single contract with multiple work categories as inclusions. So that way we don't have to negotiate multiple T's and C's or sign multiple documents. It'd be one set of T's and C's and then each work category be written into the inclusions.
Next question is, the escalation platform may not be applicable to mechanical and electrical scopes due to the number of different items and sizes and combinations of copper, steel, etc. may require further clarification. So I think this is asking about the various types and the quantity of different materials, and we had identified 5 indices that can be listed as the maximum. Doing a review of the different scopes, we recognize that we may not get every single little nut, bolt, part, and piece, but we felt like limiting it to 5 was a fair range that majority of the bidders could comply with. So that does put a certain level of responsibility on the bidder to handle any item outside of the 5 listed indexes or commodity codes.
Yep. But I think to further build upon possibly your question, Don, is let's say you choose copper wire as an index, or I'm just going to pull that out of the air. Use copper wire as an index, and you have multiple sizes of wiring that you're providing. When you provide us, upon notice of award, we ask you, hey, provide us your detailed takeoff of those items. That's copper wire index can apply to multiple items as long as it's the same material type, right? So you can't utilize a copper wire to apply to metal conduit, but if you have multiple gauge wires throughout the job, you can use that index to apply to each of those.
Next question, do we bid quantities per your Excel sheet, or do we bid our quantities based off of our takeoffs? So that's, I recognize that company. So that's for work category 3100, provided some quantities for the earthwork and utilities. So some provided those quantities based off the 90% drawings. They were not updated to the 100% document set. They're provided for subcontractors' reference to help ensure that you're able to take off and bid a complete scope of work. But subcontractors are ultimately going to be responsible for taking off their own quantities as well as executing those quantities. I think we mentioned before that the agreement is going to be a lump sum agreement, not unit price. So regardless of how we perform the quantities, the earthwork and utility subcontractor would be responsible for all the earthwork and yard piping identified on the statement of work.
Any other questions? These are great questions. Don, did that answer your question regarding your concern with escalation?
Yes, principally. Based on what you said, it makes sense. It just, for the 5 areas, you have the 5 areas, but then to have a list of items following that would be for a project this size is going to be a large list of, like we said, different sizes of copper wire or different sizes of conduit. Or the list is going to be fairly large, and
Yeah.
then it would apply. Also, on commodities, a lot of times we don't go out for quote on commodities, so it's whatever's in our base, our computer base, and so it would be that compared to the actual PO. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's kind of the condition of this is we have to establish the baseline cost, and the method we've chose for doing that is through a quote acquired during the bid time period up until November 4th.
So if we basically are the successful contractor, then we would have an opportunity to go out and get, let's say, the copper quoted, because we wouldn't generally quote commodities prior to or after.
You would need to have that those baseline quotes prior to the bid being turned in.
Yeah. So if you had a quote dated November 3rd, that suffices as backup.
Okay, so basically, trade service is a product we use, and it gives us commodity prices for the commodities. Is that, I mean, I guess, is that going to be considered a quote, or does it have to be from a specific distributor warehouse type approach? I mean, those are just questions, I guess.
Yeah, that's probably something that we need to get some more information from you on to answer that accurately. But the essence is that we have something, a written quote on the supplier's letterhead. But if you want to submit us, some more clarification, detailed information on this, we'll definitely evaluate that with the owner.
Okay, yeah, that sounds fine. Thank you.
Yep. And next question, will you be sending out a list of attendees to this meeting to us? We'll review that with the client to see how that is, but we could be able to, Craig, if you have questions on specific scope of work that, especially if you're a supplier or a third tier vendor or subcontractor, we can definitely provide you a list of individuals that are, or companies that are bidding specific work category packages, so you can make sure that you get in contact with them to provide your number too.
Yeah, and we'll just clarify again that this is a non-mandatory meeting.
Yeah, so that's what makes it difficult too, is not everyone is here.
Okay, well, it looks like it's been a few minutes since we received any additional questions, and we're nearing the end of our time. So I guess we'll conclude here. Want to thank all of you for your time. No, 2.5 hours is a long time, but again, we wanted to go through this information to set you guys up to have a good understanding of the project requirements and efficiently prepare your proposals. Again, if you have future questions, please email those to us and we'll address those through an addendum. And again, we thank you for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.